Alright, we should be live right now. Just gonna double tap that everything's looking good on my end. Yada da da. Yada da da. Come on, show me potato salad. Alright, looks like we are live. Excellent, excellent. Okay. Alright, we are continuing where we left off with the 18th Dynasty video by History with Sai, or Kai, however you say it, probably Sai. And we're at Thutmose the Fourth. That's where I'll be taking notes. And again, just to get sort of like a good sense of what's going on in Egypt during the supposed time of the Exodus, just to kind of see if we can glean any kind of insight from it.
Controversial pharaohs of the 18th dynasty for several reasons, but most notably because many Egyptologists believe that he was a usurper. His elder brother had originally been designated as Amenhotep II's successor, but he either predeceased his father or, as many believe, was ousted by the one who became Thutmose IV. As evidence of the latter, several Egyptologists have cited passages from the so-called dream stela of Thutmose IV, which he purposely placed in between the paws of the Great Sphinx. Both father and son had a particular fondness for this monumental structure, but Thutmose IV went way beyond Amenhotep II with his reverence for the Sphinx. In the dream stela, Thutmose states that Horemakhet was his personal guardian, and that the deity came to him in a dream when he was still a prince, and promised that he would become pharaoh if he removed the large deposits of sand that had accumulated up to the neck of the Great Sphinx over the centuries. The relevant passage from the dream stela goes as follows.
One of those days, it so happened that Prince Thutmose came, passing by at the time of midday, and he sat down in the shadow of this great god. Sleep seized him, asleep at the time when the sun was at the zenith, and he found the majesty of this noble god speaking with his own mouth, like the words of a father for his son, saying,
"Look at me. See me, my son Thutmose. I am your father, Horemakhet Khepri Atum, and I shall give you the kingship on earth in front of all the living ones. You shall wear the white and the red crowns upon the throne of Geb, the hereditary prince. The earth shall be yours in its length and width, all that the eye of the Lord of all illuminates. The food of the two lands shall be yours, and the great tributes of every foreign land. Your lifetime will be a time great in years. My face is yours, my heart is yours, as you are a protector to me. For my present condition is like one that is in need. All my limbs are dismembered, as the sands of the desert upon which I lie have reached me. So run to me, to have that done which I desire, knowing that you are my son and my protector. Come forth, and I shall be with you. I shall be your leader."
Thutmose IV claims to have done as instructed, clearing away the sand and restoring the damaged parts of the Sphinx, and as his reward, he was made Pharaoh of Egypt. Of course, many Egyptologists don't buy it, and believe that the story was simply royal propaganda that had been concocted by Thutmose to cover up seizing the throne from his brother. But there may have been another reason as to why Thutmose may have commissioned this stela. Claiming Horemakhet as his father and protector meant that he was not beholden to the almighty god, Amun, and probably more importantly, his priesthood, which, by his reign, had become extremely influential in the politics of the country. In fact, Amun isn't even mentioned within the text of the Dream Stela, which in hindsight appears to have been a precursor to the religious revolution that was on the horizon. Whether truly legitimate or not, Thutmose IV's time on the throne was short, just 10 years. But His was a calm and prosperous reign, thanks to all that his predecessors had done to create a strong and stable state. With the exception of a few minor rebellions, there were no large-scale military campaigns recorded, and gold continued to flow from the mines of Nubia. The pharaoh's loyal military made sure to keep dissent amongst Egypt's subject territories and client kingdoms to a minimum. And so, Thutmose IV wasn't required to lead his troops into battle. The continued peace with the Mitanni also allowed for the free flow of gold and goods from the east. Copper, tin, wine, lapis lazuli, wood, textiles, and all sorts of exotic items from the east found their way into the markets of Memphis and Thebes. Like his forebearers, Thutmose IV also had his fair share of construction projects at Karnak and other places, one of these being the completion of what's today the world's tallest standing obelisk, which currently resides not in Egypt, but in Rome. Known today as the Lateran Obelisk, it was started by Thutmose III, but finally completed during the reign of Thutmose IV. About 14 centuries later, the great obelisk was transported to Rome on the orders of Emperor Constantius II, where it's been ever since. Though his reign had been relatively short, Thutmose IV left behind for Amenhotep III, his son and successor, an Egyptian state that was the wealthiest and most powerful that it had ever been in history. It was an empire at peace with its neighbors. In fact, there is not one Egyptian military campaign recorded in Asia during Amenhotep III's entire reign of 38 years, and the brief uprisings that did occur in Nubia were quickly put down by the pharaoh's viceroy of Kush. Due to his father's short time on the throne, Amenhotep III was quite young when he...
Alright, so 1390 to 1352. Interesting. No wars/battles recorded, which is interesting.
He became pharaoh, and it's possible that his mother, Mutemwia, acted as regent until he came of age. As she was a commoner, there seems to have been no threat of her pulling a stunt like Hatshepsut and anointing herself as pharaoh. She seems to have had some influence, though, in choosing his first wife, a woman named Tie, who was from a noble family from the Nile Delta. She became Amenhotep III's great royal wife, and bore him at least 2 sons and 4 daughters. Tie, though, was not his only wife. In addition to her, Amenhotep had several other wives and concubines, many of them being foreign princesses who were the result of diplomatic marriages. 2 of the best known of these were the Mitanni princesses, Gilukepa and Tadukepa, but there were also several others from Babylon, the Levant, and even the Arzawa region of Anatolia. As Amenhotep III ended up living for nearly 4 decades, the list of women who occupied the royal harem constantly expanded. In contrast to his dynastic ancestors, such as Ehmose, Thutmose I, and Thutmose III, Amenhotep III lived a relatively easy life. Though he would have had some mandatory military training, he had little, if any, real combat experience. Instead, he spent much of his time as a young pharaoh participating in various sports, such as hunting large animals. One scarab commemorating such a hunt reads as follows.
One came to his majesty saying, "There are wild bulls in the desert in the region of Shetep." His majesty sailed downstream, making good time, arriving in peace at the region of Shetep in the morning. His majesty appeared in his chariot with his entire army behind him. Then his majesty ordered a ditch to be dug to enclose these wild bulls, and his majesty went forth against all these wild bulls. The number thereof 170 wild bulls. The number the king took in hunting on this first day, 56 wild bulls. His majesty waited 4 days to give his horses a rest. His Majesty appeared in the chariot again. The number of wild bulls he took in hunting, 40 wild bulls. Total number of wild bulls killed, 96.
Impressive.
It was not necessarily the most challenging hunt, especially when the bulls were confined to a set area and he had his private army to assist him. But what else can one do to prove their skills as a warrior when there are literally no wars to be fought? Since the days of Narmer and the country's earliest known dynasties, Egypt's rulers had ventured east into the Sinai and Canaan, or south to Nubia, in order to obtain gold and the natural resources that their kingdoms needed to prosper. But by the reign of Amenhotep III, Egypt already controlled a vast empire that exceeded anything the kings of the Old and Middle Kingdoms could have ever imagined. There was now no need to fight wars for resources. Egypt had plenty of gold sailing downriver from Nubia, turquoise from mines in the Sinai, and good stone for building being quarried in all parts of the country. And its northern ports were also bringing in wealth from trade with the other civilizations of the Mediterranean and beyond. With the country's coffers overflowing with gold and silver, and its resource storehouses, as well as granaries filled to the brim, Amenhotep III probably decided that his legacy would not be as one of Egypt's greatest warriors, but its greatest builder. Amenhotep's long, stable, and peaceful reign, along with the staggering amounts of wealth that Egypt possessed, allowed him to fund construction and art projects on an unprecedented scale. In fact, no one, save for perhaps Ramesses II, who was pharaoh over a century later and reigned for 67 years, left behind more architectural wonders, though it should be noted that many of the works attributed to him were recycled, or perhaps a better term would be stolen, from Amenhotep III's own monuments. The skills of Egypt's architects, sculptors, painters, craftsmen, and jewelers all reached new heights of expertise during Amenhotep's reign. Due to the sheer size and number of the pharaoh's building campaigns, Amenhotep welcomed many artisans and laborers from abroad to come work in Egypt. All gods and goddesses were welcome too. While the earlier rulers of the dynasty had focused their devotion primarily on Amun, Amenhotep III, while not abandoning his dynasty's patron deity, was definitely fond of other immortal beings and sought their blessings by constructing temples for them. Some were dedicated to Khnum, while others to Ptah, but the deity to receive the most attention was the great ancient sun god, Ra, who was glorified and worshipped in several of his many manifestations, including Amun-Ra, his most popular form during the New Kingdom. Perhaps the most iconic set of monuments associated with Amenhotep III are what's known today as the Colossi of Memnon, on the west bank of the Nile at Thebes. The name is a misnomer and comes from Greek and later Roman travelers who saw it and believed that these two colossal statues were representations of the Ethiopian king Memnon, who in Homer's epic, the Iliad, had fought alongside the Trojans at Troy. At about 60 feet high, these statues of Amenhotep III once guarded the entrance to the pharaoh's great mortuary temple, which covered over 93 acres, and was even larger than the main temple of Amun at Karnak. In the 11th year of his reign, Amenhotep started a palace at the site today known as Malkata. It wasn't complete until 18 years later, which was just in time for the extravagant Jubilee festivals dating to his 30th, 34th, and 37th year as king. Such jubilees were rare in Egyptian history, as only 1 in 8 rulers ever reached 30 years on the throne. The Malkata Palace also contained a special temple dedicated to Amenhotep's great royal wife, Tiye. By the 1370s BC, Amenhotep III had been living the good life for well over a decade, inaugurating new construction projects, dabbling in unorthodox religion.
I just wanna, so it's talking about, from 1390 to 1352, no wars or battles, which I want to see if I can line that up with the Arumu text. What is it called? Arumu letters? Is that it? Oh shoot, what is it? Arumu? No. Shoot, what are those letters? Son of a gun. Armana letters. There we go. Armana. Amarna letters. Amarna letters. Okay. Yeah, because these are a lot of letters, some of which from Canaan that are requesting aid. Maybe this is after his rule. You know. Gosh, there's a lot of them. Obviously they're not all requests, but some of which they definitely are. Okay. So this looks like this happens after Amenhotep the Third. Or at least some of them are. It's titled, oh, that's predecessor. Okay. Hmm. Yeah, I'll need to do a deeper dive. Wikipedia is just giving a very wide overview. Alright. Okay, so something. Wait a minute. As well as his predecessor. Okay. Alright, let's keep going.
Ideas and spending considerable time in his harem. He was the most powerful man in the Near East, with more wealth and manpower than any of his neighbors. And yet, tensions could easily flare up between the egotistical rulers of empires who were often more than willing to go to war for a simple perceived insult. As Amenhotep III was busy in Thebes with his domestic agenda, it was up to Egypt's skilled diplomats and statesmen to keep the peace in the ancient Near East, which they did by facilitating the exchange of ambassadors and lavish gifts on the pharaoh's behalf, specifically with his counterparts in the kingdom of the Mitanni, Babylon, and later on, the Hittite Empire. Much of what we know about Egypt's foreign relations from this time period comes from a cache of diplomatic correspondence that we today know as the Amarna letters. Discovered in 1887 at the site of Tel el Amarna, whose real significance we'll get to shortly, the Amarna letters are actually cuneiform tablets written in the Babylonian dialect of Akkadian, which was the lingua franca of the day. The contents of these documents tell of the relations between Egypt and its neighbors, including its vassals in Western Asia. The letters received from foreign heads of state show a degree of camaraderie that comes with being in an exclusive fraternity of near equals. Each ruler regularly referred to the other as my brother and sent their good wishes and gifts. An example of one such greeting can be found in a letter from the Mitanni king Tushratta to Amenhotep III.
For you may all go well, for your household, for your wives, for your sons, for your nobles, for your warriors, for your horses, for your chariots, and in your country may all go very well.
Such pleasantries were usually a prelude to special requests or favors that the sender often expected to receive. Tushratta's letter then continues.
May my brother send me unworked gold in very great quantities, and much more gold than he sent to my father. In my brother's country, gold is as plentiful as dirt.
There was some truth to his words, for thanks to Egypt's solid control over the gold-producing regions of Nubia, Amenhotep had plenty of the precious metal to spare, and probably sent a decent amount to his so-called brother Tushratta, who at the time was facing pressure from rivals within the Mitanni nobility, as well as a resurgent Hittite empire to the north. What Amenhotep III and other pharaohs would not send to their foreign brothers were Egyptian women to be their wives. In one of his previous letters, the Babylonian king, Kadashman-Enlil, had requested Amenhotep III to send one of his daughters to him for marriage. After all, Amenhotep had a Babylonian princess in his harem, so why should he not return the favor to his Kassite comrade in Babylon? After the pharaoh sent a letter to him rebuffing his initial request and explaining that Egyptian princesses did not marry foreigners, a rather frustrated and insulted Kadashman-Enlil wrote yet again to Amenhotep with the same request and asked why he had still not sent anyone.
Moreover, you, my brother, when I wrote to you about marrying your daughter, you wrote to me saying, "Never has a daughter of the king of Egypt been given to anyone." Why is she not given? You are king. You do as you please. If you were to give her, who would say anything? When they told me this, I wrote to my brother thus, saying, "Surely beautiful women, adult daughters, are available. Send me one beautiful woman as if she were your daughter. Who would say she is not the king's daughter? But you..."
Clever. It's like, well, it doesn't need to be a princess. Just say she's a princess. My people won't know the difference. Just send a beautiful Egyptian woman and just claim she's your daughter. My people don't know. That's a, he's trying to compromise here, so good on him.
In accord with your refusal, did not send me anyone. Did you not seek brotherhood and friendship when you wrote to me about marriage so that we might become close relations to each other? And I, myself, for this very same reason, for brotherhood and friendship, wrote to you about marriage in order that we might become close relations to each other. Why has my brother not sent me one woman?
As far as we know, Amenhotep refused Kadashman-Enlil's request. The pharaoh, though, is reported to have taken a second Babylonian wife, along with a princess from Arzawa. He at times also demanded women from his vassals as well. One letter to his Canaanite client king of the city of Gezer requested
40 female cupbearers, 40 shekels of silver being the price of a female cupbearer. Send extremely beautiful female cupbearers in whom there is no defect, so the king, your lord, will say to you, "This is excellent, in accordance with the order I gave you."
Around 1360 BC, his 30th year on the throne, Amenhotep III prepared for the age-old jubilee known as the Sed Festival, which not only reaffirmed an Egyptian king's rulership over the country, but was also meant to celebrate his life and rejuvenate his spirit. Sed festivals were very special, but also relatively rare occasions, as few kings ruled for 30 or more years. A long-reigning ruler in Egypt was also a sign of political stability and prosperity, and Amenhotep III's reign continued to have plenty of both. Unlike most members of his dynasty, who exalted and devoted themselves to the god Amun, Amenhotep III made no secret of his rather unusual fascination and personal connection with the sun god, Ra. He often referred to himself as Ra's chosen one, the heir of Ra, and the eye of Ra.
Ra, 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 ra. Okay.
Many years before the said festival, he had personally ordered the construction of solar courts, also associated with Ra, at all of the major places of worship throughout Egypt and Nubia. But during his said festival, which lasted several months, Amenhotep may have taken things much further by possibly becoming the first Egyptian king to be deified during his lifetime. This is something that is not totally agreed upon by all Egyptologists, but those arguing in favor of it cite several aspects of the latter years of the king's reign. One is that he claimed to be the living Aten, which was a manifestation of the sun god Ra, represented by a solar disk or orb. Amenhotep not only associated himself with the Aten, but also used to refer to himself as the dazzling Aten. But greater proof of him becoming a living god during his lifetime is due to a ritual or reenactment that Amenhotep and his wife, Tiye, partook in, where the king was united with the sun god, which, according to Egyptian belief, only happened after the ruler had already died. Egyptologist Toby Wilkinson describes how this may have occurred during the said festival.
On the morning of the main celebrations, the courtiers, high officials, royal acquaintances, and other dignitaries were ushered into the palace. There, the king showered them with gifts of gold necklaces, golden ornaments in the shapes of ducks and fish, and as a special jubilee decoration, ribbons of green linen. The guests shared in a great breakfast banquet with their sovereign before being directed to leave the palace and proceed to the artificial harbours. Then, in a spectacular set-piece display of royal power and divine kingship, Amenhotep III and Tai appeared at the waterside, decked from head to foot in gold, dazzling like the sun itself. At the eastern harbour, they boarded a replica of the sun god's morning bark. The waiting courtiers picked up the prow ropes and pulled the ship gently along, acting out the daily miracle by which the sun god was towed into the heavens at dawn. The scene then shifted to the western harbour, where king and consort appeared once again, but this time in a replica of the sun god's evening bark. Dignitaries grasped the tow ropes, and the scene was repeated, symbolizing the sun god's descent into the underworld at dusk.
The fact that Amenhotep identified so strongly with the sun god and the Aten, as well as carried out the reenactment of this post-death ritual while still alive, has been interpreted by many that the pharaoh had essentially deified himself by merging with the sun during his lifetime. As arguably the most powerful and definitely the richest man on earth, it's not hard to see that Amenhotep may have indeed thought he was already divine. Or it simply could have been for the entertainment for all of those in attendance. Amenhotep III was not one to spare any expense when it came to his own self-promotion, and so his several-month said festival, possibly the greatest party that the world up until then had ever seen, had to outdo any other event that had ever occurred in history. Amenhotep III would go on to celebrate a second jubilee during his 34th year on the throne, and another during his 37th. It's from documents related to Amenhotep's jubilees and other large projects that we've learned quite a bit about the people closest to him, both at court and in the field. Many of these people became extremely influential during the latter years of Amenhotep's reign. One of these was Amenhotep, son of Hapu, who, though he was never a royal vizier, was one of the pharaoh's most trusted men. An older government official who had served in past administrations as a scribe, priest, and eventually an architect, Amenhotep, son of Hapu's many important tasks included quarrying and transporting the stone used in the construction of some of the pharaoh's most monumental and iconic structures, including the so-called Colossi of Memnon. This extremely prestigious position paved the way for him to play a more prominent role in the Sed festival, as well as become the chief steward for the pharaoh's daughter, Princess Sitamun. When he died at the age of 80 during Amenhotep's 34th regnal year, the pharaoh had a mortuary temple built for him near his own, and created an endowment for its upkeep that was still functioning over 3 centuries later. Other officials were also honored with lavish tombs, most of them in and around Thebes, but some also around the great necropolis of Saqqara, near the step pyramid of King Djoser. As for Amenhotep III, he died in 1352 BC, just a year after his 3rd Sed festival. His cause of death isn't known, but he was in his late 40s when he took his last breath, and his body was soon laid to rest in the Valley of the Kings near the remains of his ancestors. As we've seen, Amenhotep III had many wives and concubines, so it's no surprise that he also had many children, not all of whom are known to us. The one who initially became his crown prince was named Thutmose, who was his eldest son from his great royal wife, Tiye. However, in the 30th year of Amenhotep's reign, around the same time as he was celebrating his first Sed festival, Thutmose unexpectedly died, and his younger brother, also named Amenhotep like his father, became the new crown prince, and possibly junior co-ruler. When Amenhotep III died 8 years later, his son and successor became Amenhotep IV. Very little is known about Amenhotep IV before he became king.
Alright, so we're moving on to Amenhotep IV slash Akhenaten, which I believe is this the dude that kind of changes things up and tries to establish monotheism in Egypt, if I remember correctly. 1352, 1336.
Some Egyptologists believe that he was born in Thebes, while others contend that his birthplace was Memphis. The woman who would become Amenhotep IV's great royal wife was Nefertiti, whose name means, "a beautiful woman has come." Due to this, some have speculated that she may have been a foreign princess, but there's no strong evidence for this. It's likely that she came from a noble, though non-royal family. Some have even theorized that her father may have been the aged royal vizier, Ai, who eventually went on to become pharaoh himself. But more on that later. Though Amenhotep IV would eventually take other wives, surviving texts, inscriptions, and especially artwork indicate that he and Nefertiti had an extremely close relationship.
And alien babies, look at those heads. What's going on with those skulls, my dude?
She would give him 6 daughters, but no sons. Initially, Amenhotep IV followed in the footsteps of his father by commissioning new, monumental buildings in Thebes and the great temple complex at Karnak. Outside of that temple's eastern walls, so that it could face the sunrise, Amenhotep started the construction of a new sanctuary dedicated to the Aten, which, as mentioned earlier, was an aspect of the sun god Ra and represented by a solar disk or an orb. By his grandfather Thutmose IV's time, but probably also before that, the Aten was worshipped as if it were itself an independent deity. The largest temple within this new sanctuary was the Gempa Aten, meaning the Aten is found. It was a roofless building with an offering table towards its center that was directly exposed to the rising sun. Whether Amenhotep IV had thought to build such a grand temple on his own, or was simply continuing a project devised by his father, isn't known, but the sanctuary became his crowning achievement at Karnak. Amun's status as the patron god of the pharaoh and his family drastically changed during the reign of Amenhotep III, who clearly associated himself with and worshipped the Aten. However, even after he supposedly deified himself, Amenhotep III still acknowledged and maintained the sanctuaries of the other gods within Egypt's vast pantheon. His son and successor, Amenhotep IV, would go much further and very clearly promote the worship of the Aten above all others. By the third year of his reign, the new king had already celebrated at least one said festival dedicated to the Aten. Some have speculated that this may have been to honor his own father, Amenhotep III, the dazzling Aten, who was now a god. Perhaps, but what is known is that from roughly that point onward, Amenhotep IV focused his worship primarily, if not entirely, on the Aten, and treated it like some heavenly pharaoh with its own royal names and cartouches. Going forward, we'll refer to the cult centered around the Aten as Atenism. The most radical changes, though, were still to come. During the 5th year of his reign, Amenhotep IV officially changed his name to Akhenaten, which can be translated in different ways, including servant of the Aten, or beneficial to the Aten. Nefertiti also added the title Neferneferu Aten before her name, which according to one scholar translates as, "The most perfect is the Aten." In addition, the Aten would no longer appear atop the head of a falcon, as had generally been the case in popular depictions, but was now represented as a simple solar orb whose rays ended with human hands. Religious makeovers aside, Amenhotep IV, now Akhenaten, had inherited a stable, extremely prosperous, and highly bureaucratic state with a formidable military that had, up until then, enabled Egypt to keep its position as the wealthiest and most powerful nation in the ancient world at that time. This was of course due to the reforms and innovations, not to mention the sheer tenacity of his ancestors such as Thutmose I, Hatshepsut, Thutmose III, and even his own father, Amenhotep III, under whose reign Egypt had arguably reached the pinnacle of its civilization. They had all done their part to bequeath to Akhenaten an empire that ran like a well-oiled machine, and that possessed seemingly unlimited resources at its disposal. Thus, Akhenaten could more or less rule as he liked. But there was one being, and specifically one institution, blocking Akhenaten from building his Aten-centered utopia: Amun and his powerful priesthood. Ever since the days of Ahmose I, when the cult of Amun had become the national one, royal patronage of its temples and priesthood had made it the most important and prestigious religious organization in the country. Over the past 2 centuries, the religious establishment devoted to Amun had become extremely wealthy and influential in Egyptian politics. They also benefited tremendously from their strong ties to the country's more conservative elites, and combined, these two forces could even rival the absolute power of the pharaoh. Akhenaten must have known that he would encounter stiff resistance against his religious radicalism, and so he decided to build a new capital city that was far away from the priesthood and those from the Egyptian nobility who might oppose him. Such a city would also be away from the colossal temple of Amun and any other religious institution that could interfere with the worship of the Aten. The site he chose for it was up until then an unused part of the eastern bank of the Nile, roughly equidistant from Egypt's two historical power centers of Memphis and Thebes. He called it Akhetaten, meaning the horizon of the Aten.
Un momento. Hmm. Hmm. Mm. Mm. Okay.
In an inscription, Akhenaten stated that he took advice from the Aten with regard to its construction.
Setting out on the good road to Akhetaten on the first anniversary of visiting it, which His Majesty had done so as to found it as a monument to the Aten, according to the command of his father, Ri Harakti, who rejoices.
Good road to Aka. Hold on. Getting distracted.
Aten, meaning the horizon of the Aten. In an inscription, Akhenaten stated that he took advice from the Aten with regard to its construction.
Setting out on the good road to Akhetaten on the first anniversary of visiting it, which His Majesty had done so as to found it as a monument to the Aten, according to the command of his father, Ri Harakti, who rejoices in light land, who gives life forever, to make for him a monument in its midst.
Today, most people refer to the site by its local Arabic name, Tel El Amarna, or simply Amarna. The name also refers to the span of time that included the reigns of Akhenaten and his short-lived successors, which we call the Amarna period. Building cities in any age required natural resources, manpower, and time. The first two Akhenaten had in abundance. Time, though, was limited, and so the pharaoh's architects and builders avoided the use of massive blocks of stone, which were both more expensive and extremely difficult to transport. Instead, they used much smaller blocks and mud bricks that weighed on average 50 kilograms. Known today as talatats, the bricks were easy to handle and could be assembled in various layouts rather quickly. After a building or even a wall had been erected, reliefs were often carved onto the bricks, which were then painted in bright colors. The use of such blocks allowed for the construction of a functioning city in just 2 years. The most important building was the House of the Aten, which was a great, roofless temple dedicated to the Aten that stood at the heart of the city. Inside, there were no idols, just a large courtyard at the center with an open altar for offerings. Nearby were administrative buildings where the king's top government officials and advisors worked. The royal family's palace complex was located at the northwestern part between the Nile and the surrounding cliffs that protected the city. Not too far away were large mansions where the pharaoh's most trusted advisors lived. The city also had beautiful gardens that were irrigated by a network of canals. Just south of the city was land used for farming and cattle grazing. Running through Akhetaten was what some have called the Royal Road. Surrounded by his guards, Akhenaten would ride every day on his golden chariot from the royal palace to the house of the Aten, as well as the nearby government buildings where he would first worship and then work. Akhetaten was just as much a religious center as it was the political and administrative capital of Akhenaten's New Egypt. Buildings, temples, and monuments in Akhetaten were decorated and embellished with a particularly new and unique style of art, said to have been devised by Akhenaten himself. The art of the period was innovative for its day, in that it combined a sort of realism with distorted facial and bodily features. For example, there were many scenes that depicted daily life in vivid detail, including a level of intimacy between the king, his wife, and their children that had never before been seen in Egyptian art. At the same time, they are portrayed with elongated faces, stretched necks, thick lips, unusually wide hips, and bulging bellies that make one wonder if they all had some sort of deformity or disease. The vast majority of Egyptologists, though, have ruled this out. More than likely, such art was intended to highlight Akhenaten and his family's otherworldliness and special place in the universe due to being the earthly representatives of the Aten. Visual arts were not the only way to convey Atenism. The ideas of the religion and the royal family's role within it could be communicated through poetry. One of the greatest works of Egyptian literature ever to come out of the New Kingdom era is what's known as the Great Hymn to the Aten. It tells of how the sun god created the world and watches everything within it. Excerpts from the hymn read as follows.
Splendid you rise in heaven's lightland, O living Aten, creator of life. When you have dawned in eastern lightland, you fill every land with your beauty. You are beauteous, great, radiant, high over every land. Your rays embrace the lands to the limit of all that you made. Being Ra, you reach their limits, you bend them for the sun whom you love. Though you are far, your rays are on earth. Though one sees you, your strides are unseen. Earth brightens when you dawn in Lightland, when you shine as Aten of daytime. As you dispel the dark, as you cast your rays, the two lands are in festivity. Awake they stand on their feet, you have roused them, bodies cleansed, clothed. Their arms adore your appearance. The entire land sets out to work, all beasts browse on their herbs.
Many scholars of religion have made comparisons between the Great Hymn to the Aten and Psalm 104 of the Hebrew Bible. Whether Akhenaten, Nefertiti, or someone else composed the hymn is unknown, but the text does break with tradition in that it's written in the vernacular of the day, and not the standard Middle Egyptian that was generally used for literary works. Though on the surface everything may have seemed joyful and bright, the city of Akhetaten had a dark side. The rush to build the city from scratch in honor of a god took its toll on the workers involved in its construction. The common people who lived and worked in Akhenaten's new city of light lived extremely difficult and rather short lives. Autopsies on the remains of workers found in nearby shallow graves indicate that most died in their late teens, with very few living until the age of 40. Further analysis showed that most were malnourished due to their poor diets, and many were physically stunted from doing hard labor. The supposed paradise of Akhetaten that they'd been brought over to build was in reality a labor camp from which countless people never left alive. As the years went by, Akhenaten and the doctrines of Atenism became more extreme. The faith went from the Aten being the greatest of the gods to being the only god permitted to be worshipped. Akhenaten ordered his followers to erase the names of other deities, with the exception of the Aten and Ra, from all monuments and temples across Egypt. This, of course, was much easier said than done, and as we can still see today, there are countless monuments and old temples predating Akhenaten with the names of other deities in their inscriptions that are still very much intact. The pharaoh's edict, though, did make one thing clear. The worship of any other deity, especially Amun, was now officially banned. This has brought up a fierce debate amongst scholars as to whether or not Atenism was a true monotheism, meaning a religion that believed solely in the existence of only one god, or a monolatry, where devotees worshipped only one god but believed in the existence of others. Many Egyptologists, scholars of religion, and even philosophers state that Akhenaten's zealous worship of only the Aten, efforts to rid Egypt of the influence of other deities, and persecution of all other Egyptian cults is all clear evidence that Atenism eventually did become a monotheistic religion in the Abrahamic understanding of the term. However, there are those who make the case that Atenism didn't necessarily deny the existence of other deities besides the Aten, but rather just held them in contempt. This would then make Atenism a monolatry, where its followers believed that the Aten was the supreme and most powerful, or correct god, but not necessarily the only god. Another interesting question is how many people in Egypt actually gave up their old traditional religion for Atenism. According to Egyptologists, not that many. Other than Akhenaten and the royal family, it seems that the only real adherents of Atenism were the elites who followed their pharaoh to Akhetaten. A good number of these may have only been paying lip service to the new religion in order to win the king's favor and advance their own political careers, or at least keep the one they had. The priesthood of Amun and supporters of the old religious establishment were the biggest losers in the new regime, since they were all, effectively, out of a job. However, the archaeological record indicates that many of the common people, even the workers at Akhetaten, still clung to their own popular religion and rituals. In fact, other than closing or repurposing some of the temples, life went on as usual for most Egyptians. While some kept their religious practices a secret and even changed their names, the lives of most, especially in rural areas, changed little, if at all. Farmers went on farming, weavers continued to weave, fishermen fished in the Nile, and government officials continued to run the state as they'd always done before. Since Akhenaten spent most, if not all of his time after the first half of his reign in Akhetaten, few outside of the capital ever saw or heard from their king. Akhenaten's obsession with the Aten, as well as his role as prophet and priest of his new state religion, diverted much of his attention from governing the empire at a time when it was facing new threats in a rapidly changing geopolitical environment. By the second half of Akhenaten's reign, the balance of power had shifted in the Near East to favor a resurgent Hittite empire under their great king, Shupilluliuma, whose home base was in central Anatolia. A cunning warrior as well as shrewd statesman, Shupilluliuma took advantage of divisions within the Mitanni ruling elite to play one side against the other, and then seize territory in the Levant, edging him ever closer towards Egypt's sphere of influence. But that wasn't all, as there were also threats to stability from within the Egyptian empire's borders. In perhaps as many as 50 letters addressed directly to Akhenaten or his vizier, Rib-Hadda, the vassal ruler of the strategic port of Byblos, implored the pharaoh to send him military aid in order to ward off threats to his city from nearby rivals. These included the warlord Abdi-Ashurta and his son, Aziru, who ruled over the border region of Amuru that was at least officially a protectorate of Egypt. Part of one of Rib-Hadda's many letters to Akhenaten stressing the urgency of the situation reads as follows.
May the king, my lord, be apprised that the city of Byblos, the faithful handmaiden of the king, has been at peace since the days of his fathers. But now the king has forsaken his loyal city. May the king examine the tablets of his father's palace whether the man who is in Byblos has not been a loyal servant. Do not be silent concerning your servant, since great is the hostility of the Apiru troops against him. And as the gods of your land live, used up are our sons and our daughters, and the wood of our houses for payment to the land of Yarimuta to preserve our lives.
Several of Ribhada's other letters also illustrate Akhenaten and his government's apparent neglect of Egypt's Canaanite possessions.
Now, thus I have written to the palace, but you do not return a word to me. Was it not in the past, regarding all the lands of the king, that yearly the regular troops were coming forth to inspect the lands? But now the lands of the king and the city of Sumur, your garrison city, have gone over to the Apiru men, and you keep silent. Send a large regular army and you can drive out the enemies of the king from within his land, and all the lands will be joined to the king. Furthermore, you are the great lord. You must not ignore this message. Why do you not send back word to me, so that I may know the thing that I should do? Furthermore, I have been writing for garrison troops and for horses, but they are not being given. Just send me the word, and I myself will make a treaty with Abdi Ashirta, like Yapa Hadi and Zimreda, and I will stay alive.
There are many such letters from Ribhada, but in the end, he received no support from his king, and was eventually ousted from his post and possibly killed in Sidon by men loyal to Aziru of Amuru. Many of the more capable statesmen and bureaucrats who were running the government must have realized that the status quo couldn't go on for much longer. Those well-versed in their country's most recent history knew that previous pharaohs, such as Thutmose III, who were devoted to Amun and the old gods, would not have let such a plea for help from a loyal vassal go unanswered. If anything, they would have personally led a grand army to deal with the transgressors and restore order. Akhenaten's religious revolution was becoming a big problem that, if left unchecked, could lead to not only the destruction of the Egyptian empire and a breakdown of the state, but even the end of Egyptian civilization as it had existed for nearly 2 millennia. But it was not easy to overthrow a pharaoh, especially one as powerful as Akhenaten. Surrounded by bodyguards, sycophants, and loyalists, Akhenaten's self-isolation in the city of Diaten protected him somewhat from a coup, and as far as we know, the army was still not only behind him, but also enforcing many of his edicts to promote Atenism throughout the country. The last 5 years of Akhenaten's life are full of intrigue and mystery. Very little written evidence survives from that time, but it's believed that he may have had problems stemming from poor health and the lack of a male successor. Nefertiti had given Akhenaten 6 daughters, but no sons, and after the pharaoh's 12th regnal year, she essentially disappears from the historical record. Or perhaps not. Soon after her disappearance, Akhenaten ruled with a co-regent named Smen-Kakare, who most scholars believe was married to his daughter, Meriaten, though he died within a year. Afterwards, a person named Neferneferuaten is believed to have become his co-regent. Recall that this was the name that Nefertiti had simultaneously adopted when Amenhotep IV changed his name to Akhenaten. Because of this, many Egyptologists have come to the conclusion that this particular Neferneferuaten was none other than the pharaoh's beloved wife, Nefertiti. Others have speculated that Neferneferuaten may have been Akhenaten's daughter, Meriaten, who again was believed to be the wife of Smen-Kakare. The basic facts regarding these years are very sketchy, in large part due to the pharaohs after Akhenaten doing all that they could to destroy his legacy and essentially erase him from history. Akhenaten died in 1336 BC, the 17th year of his reign. Though he wished to be buried in a special tomb just outside of Akhetaten, a mummy believed to be his was uncovered in the Valley of the Kings, specifically Tomb KV-55. Though its identity could not be determined from the evidence found within the tomb, DNA analysis conducted in 2010 indicated that the mummy contained the remains of a man who was the son of Amenhotep III and the father of Egypt's most recognizable pharaoh in modern times, Tutankhamun. This has led many Egyptologists today to conclude that the mummified remains from tomb KB55 are indeed those of Akhenaten. As there are more questions than answers with regard to the final years of
Alright, let's take a little break here. Alright. Very interesting. Alright, let's get back to it. Give me 1 second though. Just gotta jot down some notes for later. Okay. Alright, let's roll.
Of Akhenaten's reign and its immediate aftermath, a great number of Egyptologists have put the start date of Tutankhamun's reign at 1336 BC, which may have overlapped with Neferneferuaten's reign or possible regency. Known by many today as the Boy King, wife. As there are more questions than answers with regard to the final years of Akhenaten's reign and its immediate aftermath, a great number of Egyptologists have put the start date of Tutankhamun's reign at 1336 BC.
Alright, so we got Tutankhamun from 1336 to 1327. Alright.
Which may have overlapped with Neferneferuaten's reign or possible regency. Known by many today as the Boy King, Tutankhamun was only 9 years old when he became pharaoh. His original name was Tutankhaten, meaning the living image of the Aten. The exact identity of his mother isn't clear, but a mummy found in tomb KV35 was identified through DNA testing as being both the mother of Tutankhamun and the daughter of Amenhotep III and his wife, Tiye, which would also make her the sister of Akhenaten. As her real name isn't known, archaeologists refer to her as the Younger Lady. Tutankhamun's wife, who was also his half-sister, was called Ankhesen Pa'aten, meaning she who lives for the Aten. She was the third of the 6 daughters born to Akhenaten and Nefertiti. The young Tutankhaten proved to be a godsend for those who wished to steer Egypt back to its traditional polytheistic religion. Not only did he have the right bloodline, but the boy king was also impressionable, and with his father dead, and most likely his mother too, Tutankhaten had few, if any, close elder relatives upon whom he could rely on for the guidance that he needed to rule. While Neferneferuaten may or may not have acted as regent during his early years, the one who ultimately stepped into this role was Ai, a man who at Tutankhaten's coronation may have already been in his late 60s. At the urging of Ai and other advisors, Tutankhaten changed his name to Tutankhamun, meaning the living image of Amun, while his wife, Ankhkesen Pa'aten, became Ankhkesen Amun, or she who lives for Amun. Soon, the new pharaoh left Akhetaten and went to the old capital of Memphis, where he issued a decree that re-established Egypt's traditional polytheistic religion and declared his devotion to Amun.
When His Majesty appeared as king, the temples and the cities of the gods and goddesses, starting from Elephantine and down to the delta marshes, had fallen into decay, and their shrines were in ruin, becoming mounds of rubble, overgrown with weeds. Their sanctuaries were like something that had not existed, and their temples were a footpath, for the land was wrecked and ruined. But after time passed, His Majesty appeared upon the throne of his father, and he ruled over the shores of Horus. The black land and the red land were under his supervision, and every land was bowing to his might. Then His Majesty took counsel with his heart, investigating every excellent deed, seeking benefactions for his father, the god Amun, and fashioning his noble image out of genuine electrum. He gave more than had given before. He fashioned an image of his father, the god Amun, his sacred image being of electrum, lapis lazuli, turquoise, and every precious stone.
What is electrum? Is that amber? Electrum. Oh, is a naturally occurring alloy of gold and silver. Huh, trace amounts of copper. Known as green gold. Interesting. Hmm. Fascinating. Mm, hmm. Very cool. Alright.
Tutankhamun's reign seems to have gotten off to a good start. However, the young pharaoh was plagued with many health problems that may have included sickle cell anemia and also suffering from severe bouts of malaria. A CT scan of Tutankhamun's mummy also showed that the king had a compound fracture in his left leg, which may have come from a fall, and complications from this may have led to an early death at the age of just 19. The discovery of Tutankhamun's small but lavish tomb in the Valley of the Kings in 1922 by Howard Carter is perhaps the greatest archaeological discovery of the 20th century. This is because it's perhaps the only tomb of a pharaoh ever to have been uncovered that also managed to escape looting by grave robbers. What was left behind was a whole host of funerary objects that included gold jewelry, chariots, furniture, cups and utensils made out of precious metals and stones, statues, fine clothing, textiles, at least 100 pairs of sandals, including some made of gold, walking canes, lots of artwork, musical instruments such as trumpets, ornate jars, and of course, his elaborate sarcophagus consisting of 3 coffins, the innermost being made of solid gold.
Damn.
Within this was the king's iconic gold funeral mask and his mummy, which, due to its poor condition, shows that the embalming process had been hastily done. Altogether, over 5,000 different objects were uncovered from his burial chamber, which makes one wonder that if so much were found in Tutankhamun's relatively small tomb, then what treasures must have been in the burial places of other, more powerful and significant kings. Since the boy king had left no heir, the untimely death of Tutankhamun created a major problem with regard to his successor. The 2 most influential people at the time, the Vizier Ai and Horemheb, the supreme commander of the armed forces, were also the 2 greatest contenders for the throne of Egypt. As Horemheb was likely with the army in the Levant fending off Hittite attacks, the aged Ai took advantage of his absence and crowned himself to be the next pharaoh. Some have speculated that he may have been chosen to succeed Tutankhamun because he was the father of Nefertiti, but this has never been proven. Other evidence seems to point to the notion that Tutankhamun had designated Horemheb to be his successor, but as he was away tending to military matters, like a vulture, Ai swooped in and grabbed the throne. That, or he himself might have had Tutankhamun killed while Horemheb was away. The theories of what happened immediately after Tutankhamun's death are many, but also inconclusive. Ai, though, didn't have the right bloodline, and so to make his claim to the throne more legitimate, he may have married Tutankhamun's widow, Ankhesenamun, who at the time was also perhaps the last surviving descendant of Akhenaten, Amenhotep III, and the whole Thutmosian line of pharaohs. The main evidence for such an arrangement comes from a series of letters that the Hittite king, Shupilluliuma, apparently received from an unnamed Egyptian queen with the bizarre request of asking him for one of his sons to marry. Shupilluliuma's successor, Mushili II, would later recount the story.
When my father was done in the country of Kharkhamish, he sent Lupaki and Tarkhunt Zalma into the country of Amka. And when the people of Egypt heard about the attack on Amka, they were frightened. And since, besides, their lord Nimkhururiya had died, the Queen of Egypt sent a messenger to my father with this message. My husband has died. I have no sons. They say that you have many sons. If you were to give me one of your sons, he would become my husband. I will never take a servant of mine and make him my husband. I am afraid.
It was an extremely odd request, but it aligns well with the known facts. Nib-Kururiya is the cuneiform rendition of Neb-Keperura, the throne name of Tutankhamun, who also died without an heir. His widow, Ankhesenamun, who at the time was in her 20s, would have also loathed to be forced to marry an aged commoner such as I, a man over 3 times her age, and in this case would have probably preferred the prince of a rival nation. In the end, we know that nothing became of the proposed Egyptian-Hittite union because Murshili II tells us that when one of Shupilluliuma's sons was finally sent, he died along the way to Egypt, possibly killed by the agents of Ai or other xenophobic Egyptians who would not have approved of a foreign prince becoming the new ruler of the Egyptian Empire. We also don't have any real evidence that Ankhesenamun married Ai. At just 4 years, Ai's reign was very short, and in his tomb, which originally may have been for Tutankhamun, he's depicted with his only known wife, Te. There's no depiction, or even a mention of Ankhesenamun. After the death of Ai, General Horemheb, also a commoner, succeeded him.
Alright, short and insignificant reign. On to Horemheb. Alright, reign 1323, 1295.
Not a fan of his predecessor, who he may have believed stole the kingship from him while he was away, Horemheb removed Ai's name from all public monuments, and then did the same for Akhenaten and Tutankhamun, basically putting the final nail in the coffin of the Amarna era. In the king list that would follow, the pharaohs from Akhenaten to Ai were never mentioned. The line went straight from Amenhotep III to Horemheb. Being a soldier at heart, Horemheb felt that the decadence and excess of Akhenaten's reign, not to mention his repudiation of the country's traditional gods and religion, had made Egypt weak. And so, he took firm measures to re-establish what he thought was law and order, as well as to reinstate, or at least reorganize, many of the country's institutions that had suffered during the past 2 decades. Horemheb was extremely distrustful of the old nobility, especially those who had followed Akhenaten, and he used whatever means at his disposal to curb their power. The temples that had been neglected during the Amarna period were refurbished and repopulated with priests loyal to both the old gods and to himself. The houses of worship built by Akhenaten and staffed by Atenes were torn down or repurposed. He also sent workers to Akhetaten to erase all traces of the heretic king and his wife, Nefertiti. Their statues were smashed and tossed into a heap of rubble near what had once been the great temple known as the House of the Aten. Horemheb then focused on weeding out corruption that had been rampant at all levels of Egyptian society. In an inscription from Karnak that has come to be known as the Great Edict of Horemheb, we're told that he at least claimed to do the following.
His Majesty took counsel with his heart how he might expel evil and suppress lying. The plans of His Majesty were an excellent refuge, repelling violence, and delivering the Egyptians from the oppressions which were among them. Behold, His Majesty spent the whole time seeking the welfare of Egypt and searching out instances of oppression in the land.
Of the document's 10 clauses, 4 of them specifically deal with punishments for corrupt government and palace officials, which, depending on the offense, could include anything from exile to facial mutilation, such as cutting off one's nose. To enforce his laws were new judges that Horemheb approved himself. They too were not above the law, for if found guilty of corruption themselves, they could be sentenced to death. Horemheb presented himself as a champion of the poor, and since he himself came from a modest background, many viewed him to be one. However, others saw his stuffing the courts and temples with loyalists as just another one of his tactics to consolidate more power for himself. But he was a hero for traditionalists, because by the end of Horemheb's reign in 1295 BC, Atenism had been completely purged from the corridors of power and replaced by the priests of Amun, who were now free to proclaim their god's greatness. Perhaps the only thing of importance that Horemheb had failed to procure during his 28-year reign was a son to be his heir. And so, Horemheb selected one of his generals named Paramisu to follow him as pharaoh upon his death. Paramisu is better known to us today by the name Ramesses, and having already a son and a grandson, he would go on to start a new line of kings that we today refer to as the 19th dynasty of Egypt. But the start of a new dynasty was not the end of the new kingdom. Far from it. In fact, some of its best years and most celebrated rulers were yet to come. We'll learn more about all this in the next installment of Ancient Egypt, Dynasty by Dynasty. Stay tuned. Thanks for watching.
Alright. Very educational. Gosh, I have so many notes on the 18th dynasty now. Good gracious. Oh, how does this all go together? Does this all go together? No idea. No idea. Hmm. Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, it's like, could the attacks in Canaan during Akhenaten's reign be because of the Israelites? Maybe. Maybe. Hard to say. Yeah, I think it is time for me to prep my evaluation. Yeah. I think the way I want to do this is start with history before we get into the actual what the book of Exodus actually, get into the actual book. I think I want to start with history. Like, all right, let's talk about the historical context. And then we go talk about, part 1, chapters 1 through 6, part 2, chapters 7 through 14, part 3, 15 through 19, part 4, 20 through 31, part 5, 32 through 40. Okay. All right. All right. History. Yeah, this is gonna be. All right. Oh, gotta think about how do I want to cover this? What's important? All right. Okay, obviously Joseph. Joseph and fam settle Goshen in the 18, like, let's say around 87 BC? 1886? I wrote this down somewhere. Right. Son of a gun. $1876. Alright, alright. 1876. Alright, around that time. Evidence shows Semites settling Avaris around this time. So that's, that's evidence 4. I guess the next thing to mention is, just for context for everyone, Bible has a time gap from 1876 to roughly to, I don't know, to like 1520-ish. Yeah. All right. Next, let's cover. All right. Well, what happens in between that time frame? Okay. All right, so let's do 1876. Let's just say to 1500. Or we can say to 1406 because we have 2 different dates. Yeah. Mm. 6 to 4. All right. 1406. That was the late date. Okay. Major events. Major events. Shoot. Should I have written down times for that moment? Okay. All right. Mm. So what's interesting is around the time that Joseph supposedly arrived is around the time that it shows extensive irrigation system in the region, which kind of can very well coincide with Joseph trying to advise the king in that actually kind of lines up strangely enough. Huh. All right. Work on irrigation system. Yeah, that lines up with Joseph being in the region. So that's interesting. Okay. All right. All right, we'll do. What time do they give this? I guess we can. When when did he reign? Co-region of 5 years, sole reign around 15 years. Okay. All right, so during Senusret II's reign, um, many, or let's do, Probably. The Kavre comes into being. What is the Kavre? Hmm. Okay. Okay, can I get like a rough guesstimate on his reign? Alright, 1926 reign. 1926 through 1895. Besse. Um, irrigation projects occur um, from Bar Yusuf to through the construction of a dike from Bar Yusuf to Lake Morris with a dike at El Lahun. If I could spell correctly, El Lahun. Alright. This coincides with Joseph helping the Pharaoh um prepare for the famine. Alright. During his reign, it is documented that many people from Canaan came into the land and settled Avaris, which is in Goshen. So that roughly lines up. Roughly. Ish. You know? Hmm. Huh. Again, you can't expect dates be extremely precise when people are trying to getting like, yeah, it was about, 480 years ago. I don't know, roughly. It's like it might have been more than that. Unless, I don't know. Unless the Exodus happened earlier. Yeah. Hmm. Mm. Possible. Hmm. Mm. Yeah, when you only have one person claiming that the pharaoh was Amenhotep, a Amenhotep. They didn't even say if it was the first or the second or the third or whatever. Um, take it with a grain of salt. Might not have been Amenhotep who was the pharaoh during the Exodus. This is all predicated on if the Exodus actually happened, which we're trying to, trying to give it its best chance. We're giving it, I'm on the side. It's like give it the best chance you can and see where the pieces land. If it didn't happen, then at least we gave it its best shot, and then we can kind of go, okay, this is the best we can give it, and then go from there and see how much merit it has given the best chance to succeed. Generally, how I operate. All right. Wait, see, not the. Hmm. Mm, yeah, that's the thing. If you it's trying to look, in my opinion, the Bible is not when it comes to like length of time for certain events, I don't trust the Bible. I don't. Confidence level low. Just primarily due to um just simply how old they claim people live is so out there compared to what the evidence suggests on the ground for how long people lived back in the day. With all the disease and everything like that, the fact that all these people are being claimed to live like 100+ years is bonkers. Absolutely bonkers. It makes me think, again, I've said it on stream many times, to my wide and various audience. That what if they're just counting every solstice. And so therefore it's like, okay, at least for the ages of how old people are, like cut it in half. But then I was like, wait, do we cut all the other times they list years in half? Like that doesn't, I don't know. I don't know if it's that simple. If it was that simple, I feel like somebody would have figured that out or proposed it, and it would gain at least some traction if there was evidence to support it. Outside of that, I'd have no idea. All right, so you know, and Goshen. Okay, so we have evidence of Semites moving into the area in and around what the Bible sort of claims when Joseph and the Israelites move in. So that's something. Also showing like, irrigation's being worked on in a very specific area. The fact that that is documented is significant. So that kind of lines up with the idea of Joseph advising the Pharaoh to prepare for a specific famine. What do you do? It's like, okay, we should, make more arable land and potentially, work more arable land so that you have more of a surplus than what they probably usually have. I mean, Egypt is well renowned to have a surplus of food. It's been, for most of their history, one of their exports has been grain. But you have to have a surplus to have an export, generally speaking. All right. There's not really much else during the 12th dynasty, if I recall, that really lends itself to anything that could pertain to our story with with the Bible. So, the next sort of event kind of comes about the 14th dynasty. Okay. So next we have the 14th dynasty that kind of breaks away. And that is definitely encompasses Goshen and has Avaris as either the capital or a major player during this time. This all happens from 1725. All right. All right. 25. 14th dynasty in Avaris. All right. Avaris and the Nile Delta break away. Their rulers have names. I don't know, Canaanite. I guess Canaanite / Semitic. Have Semitic names. So that's significant. 1725 through 1650. All right. Next. We move on to the 15th dynasty. All right. 16. Alright, so then we have the 15th dynasty. Alright. Alright, then 15 dynasty, 1650 to 1550 BC. Um, yeah, so the Hyksos invade from Canaan and conquer most of Lower Egypt. All right. I don't know if we to stress too much about that. All right. Then we move on to, I think the 17th dynasty is where we pick up. Okay, the 18th dynasty is the one that takes it all back. All right. 18th dynasty. Dynasty. Yo, it's so nasty. It's dynasty. All right. Defeat the Hyksos and take back Lower Egypt in 1550 BC. This is when I theorize that the Israelites become oppressed in retribution. Retribution for their support of the Hyksos. Then we'll add the verse to that. It's a verse that I'm going to quote that kind of coincides with this thought process. All right. All right. Note Exodus. Let's see. Chapter 1, verse. Guess just verse 10. Yeah, verse 10. Chapter 1, verse 10. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them being the Israelites, lest they multiply and if war breaks out, they join our enemies and fight against us. And escape from the land. I don't know if they're too worried about them necessarily escaping, I guess, but maybe they don't want them to escape because they want to punish them. Like, no, you're not going anywhere. I want to put you to work, dang it. Alright. We'll highlight. Okay. Alright. So then from 1550 BC, supposedly, you know, for about 100 years-ish, depending on how you look at it, Israelites are oppressed. If our times and dates are accurate, essentially. All right. But who knows? Um. Potential dates for the Exodus are 1446 and 1406 BC by biblical standards. Standards. How do I do it? How do I say this? Alright. Manetho places, claims that the Pharaoh of the Exodus was Amenhotep, most likely Amenhotep II. For Gosh, this is gonna be a mouthful to get through for my own vid. I know it's like, do I do bullet points and then sort of extrapolate on it? Sometimes I'm better with just bullet points instead of writing all this stuff out because then I'm just like reading it. And that can come off as a little dry. That's good to like get in detail and then potentially I can bullet point it. And that way I can kind of work it. However, low chronology places is rain. see. So reign 1427 through 1397. And high chronology places his reign at. Yeah, it's interesting. High chronology seems to be just not even argued for, even on Wikipedia. Which kind of goes to show just that there just aren't that many supporters of high chronology. Because generally speaking, you know, it's kind of a here's Orin high chronology, Orin 5052 high chronology. Then it just keeps going. There's like one little notation. You know, it's like maybe this is the. I mean, in this chronology, okay. There are alternative theories which attempt to assign him a reign of up to 35 years, which is absolute maximum length he could have reigned. In this chronology reigned from 1454 to 1419. There are certain problems facing these series which cannot be resolved. When he was 52, X-ray shows that he was about 40 when he died. 26 years from 1427. Okay. This is reign at, what is it, 1452 through yeah, we're not even plagues. The plagues. I don't think there's any record of such things. At least not during this time. There might have been a record of locusts coming in. That's not, you know, I'm sure that happens at least once every while. I don't know. Every 100 years, maybe there's a year where the locusts come and nom nom nom. I mean, a horde of locusts is something that it does occur. I don't know how often it is, but you know. Then, you know, having a plague that might kill people, maybe especially young children, you know. Sure that's something that can cause that out there, especially during this time. Maybe some mutation of malaria occurs and then everybody like gets immunity to it after some time, but like for that, you know, that 1 year where that mutation kind of sweeps through the land, that could probably kill a lot of people. Shoot. Okay. All right, so 2, 15, 20, 22. Low chronology is most popular and 1446 for Exodus is most popular. These two do not align. Again, for the biblical dates, again, these could just be like ish. So it's not like that big of a deal, you know? I doubt that these are precise dates given in the Bible because they are round numbers. And so it's generally like an ish kind of thing. Just because those two dates don't align it's not that big of a deal. Okay. Ooh, the Black Pyramid. Why is it called the Black Pyramid? Ooh, capstone. Oh, that's cool as hell. Damn, it really didn't survive much, did it? Just a mound of dirt now. Dang, a lot of these pyramids just did not survive at all. And the 12th dynasty could not seem to make long-lasting pyramids, apparently. Hmm. Alright. Okay. Alright. So, I think that's good enough for the Exodus right now. Don't need to go into, because we aren't in the portion of the Bible where they even move out of the Sinai yet. They are still in the wandering periods. So they wander. So I don't need to cover anything else after that. Okay, I guess we'll write down some facts about Amenhotep that I find interesting. Hotep second. Interesting details. The details. Quatna. Interesting. Oh yeah, he was a brutal leader. Yeah, he was a brutal leader. He displayed defeated enemy corpses. Displayed defeated enemy corpses in Thebes. Yeah, in Thebes. And sent one down to Nubia as a warning. Yeah. He often took slaves in the thousands and even tens of thousands during his many military campaigns. In Canaan. Mhm. Ramesseum. Okay. Where the heck is this? Okay. Okay. Um. Hmm. All right. So that covers Amenhotep. Um. mm, What is it? Small two. What the heck? Hmm. Mm, mm. Okay. Interesting. think it's time for my next, another break here. Yeah. Right? Or did I just, gosh, sometimes I lose track of time with all this. Like, did I take a break at 2:15? Generally take a break every hour. Just get my, just kind of refresh. So I can get some more nicotine. Nicotine. All right. All right. Break time. All right. I guess so we can do theory. All right. Israel moves into Goshen, grows in prominence, helps the breakaway dynasty of helps breakaway dynasty of the 14th. It's an oddly word. Helps the 14th dynasty break away. There you go. Helps the 14th dynasty break away. Potentially asks for military aid from Canaan, Hyksos arrive and conquer Lower Egypt. Hyksos are defeated and the Israelites are oppressed for their support of the Hyksos. Of the Hyksos. Yeah. All right. So that is the history part. Then we can move on to part 1. All right. Part 1, which is, let's see here. Might tear that page out. We'll see. All right. Just do a little taggy poo. That. Chapter 1 through 6. All right. Ay, ay, ay. Let me look at, just need to see. All right. Primarily did evidence and then highlights. Yeah, that's kind of how we formulated this. And then confidence. Okay. All right, evidence. Well, all right, let's open this up. Let's go to Exodus. All right. All right. Well, first and foremost, we have this right here. I wonder. No. Do we have the ability to highlight? Link, share, follow. Huh. What does that do? Don't know. Is that for copying? I don't even know. Wish I could highlight. Is there a way to do this? Hmm. Junior. Hmm. Wish I could highlight. So I just. No. I don't know why they don't allow a highlighter of some description. Apps and tools. No. Anyway. Alright. Links to fears of the Israelites rebelling and supporting enemies. Alright. Let's see here. Evidence, evidence, evidence. Moses, Midian, groaning. Plunder the Egyptians. Hmm. Might need to do just research a video about just evidence for the plagues. See if there's anything we can get from that. Right. Mm, again with the crazy years. Along with the fact that supposedly it's been like 300 years or something. And Moses is the great grandson of Levi, one of the original, right? Or is the great grandson of Reuben? Hold on. Years of Levi, yeah. Okay. Simeon. It's interesting that like it lists Reuben and Simeon, and then wait, was it beforehand? No, it just talks about Reuben and Simeon. And then we go Levi, into Gershon. I has Kohath. Kohath, who then has Amram, and then Amram has Aaron and Moses. So father, then we have grandfather, then we have great grandfather is supposedly Levi after 300 years. Okay. Moses. Moses or Moses? I think it's Moses. Moses. Yeah. Oh, it's Moses. Moses with an E. I always get that mixed up. Is supposedly the great grandson of Levi. And this is 300 years plus after they settle Goshen. More wild. Oh, hold on. Come on. See my face? Oh gosh, we are out of focus. Hello, camera. Oh my gosh. Come on. Come on. Chalo, it's a base. How do we get this back into focus? Chalo. I don't know. We are now severely out of focus. um, Not sure how to get us back into focus right now. Can I pause the video capture or reset it? Wish they had just like a reset button. Because now, come on, camera. Come on. Come on. Oy vey. Right? Whatever. Don't matter too much. Alright. Who cares? Okay, more wild dates for, well, the ages given for the lives of um, so Levi and his offspring. And not help offspring. Okay. Just chronically out of focus. Oh, jeez. I don't know. Nope. Nothing. Oh, okay, there we go. All right. We're back. Lamau. All right, so other evidence for or against, right? I'm making straw bricks, it's fine. Why not? Da, da, da. Do, 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 do. Ah, yes, the name of his father-in-law is question. It's a little like question mark. Yeah. Came home to the father Raoul. Raoul becomes Jethro. Question mark. Yeah. Chapter 2. It's 18 verses chapter 3 verse 1. Yeah. It's strange. Anything else? Guess we can move on to highlights slash oddities. I mean, I could put that in oddities. Um, Pharaoh expects the Hebrew midwives to kill newborn sons. Strange expectation. Yeah. Yeah. They are vigorous. Oh man. The explanation is pretty hilarious. 119 is particularly amusing. Amusing. All right. All right. So then Pharaoh's like to all his people. Wild. Hmm. Mhm. Mhm. guess you could say this right here. 1 verse 7. Chapter 1 verse 7 could refer to they grew exceedingly strong, you know, in influence potentially. Yeah. Um, all right. Let's see, what else do we got going on? Highlights. Highlights. Um, mm, hmm. I might call it here and pick up. This is something where I need to maybe gotta ask myself what is my evaluation of all this? You know what I mean? Like what do I want to highlight? What I mean, we're doing that right now, but it's sort of like I do prefer to have a more something more narrow to focus myself on specifically. Because I'm reading this, I'm like, what part of this? What's important here? This isn't, I'm not trying to just do like a retelling. This is like, what are my impressions of all this? Um, mm, did Moses even exist? I don't know. Not really enough evidence that I've seen to really suggest. We just don't have evidence of him existing other than the Bible. And I'm not going to say that Manetho is not a source to suggest. Manetho lived in 300 BC, right? Something around that time. 3rd century, so maybe even later than that. He's probably just going off of, kind of riffing off of the Jewish understanding of history. He's definitely not contemporary. I'm pretty sure by that time the Jewish religion, at least the Torah, was well established and understood by anybody who, wanted to understand Judaism or the Jewish faith or however you want to put it. Um, Yeah, there's nothing contemporary that I've been able to see. So then it's like, is this all made up? And there's a lot to go over to have it just be made up. But you know, like oftentimes when people tell a lie, they speak in so much more elaborate terms. You know, like they go way more into detail. Like people tend to do that. Hence, when I lie, I keep it short and sweet. The more details you put into it, the more you have to explain the details. The more, it's like if you keep it short and sweet, there's less questions. It's like, what are you doing here? I'm doing this. That's I just give you, and then it's your job to ask. Well, you ask the next. It's like gives me time to think as well. Uh, but yeah, I mean, there is some tendency to be so elaborate in detail, and if you have time to sort of put all this stuff together. What does the name Moses even mean? Moses name meaning drawn out of the water. Right, I think that's or child/son. Right, he drew him out of the Nile. Okay. Son. Thutmose is related to Moses. Could just mean son. Called me son. Hmm. And it sounds like drew him out. Moshe. Mose. Interesting. Okay. Not really much to go off of on that. Son went back to Jethro. Son. The Lord said to son, and son took the staff of God in his hands. In his hand. Hmm. Alright. Pretty bland name, all things considered. Um, just so many oddities in here. Do I really want to go through every single oddity? We'd be here for days, for days. I just list everything I found like kind of like, you know, odd or like something worth mentioning. This might be a 2-hour vid. Which is fine. It's fine. Just if it has to be, it has to be, There's not much I can do about that. I think what I need to do is just like include everything. Leave no stone left unturned. Ay, ay, ay. Means I might consider. Hmm. Hmm. Drew him out of the water. Hmm. Oh, goodness. Yeah, I'm gonna call it here for the day. Alright, y'all. Have a good one. Peace.